I'm Tobias from Astralis, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a joke-free zone.
Astralis are the champions of IEM Katowice, the 14th CSGO major, their third title as an organisation. Now, obviously, a lot of what we're going to talk about in this video is going to be the greatness of Astralis, the breadth of their accomplishment, what they've been able to do overall. But let's start out just with looking at the tournament and what happened to them in the tournament and how they were able to get to the end. So they cruised through the Swiss system portion of the tournament. It wasn't particularly that hard overall, even though obviously Renegades gave them a pretty nice game in the 2-0 matchup, which was a best of three due to the new format. Then in the playoffs, they 2-0'd every opponent. They didn't drop a single map in the playoffs. NIP had a pretty decent game against them on Dust 2 by the end of it. NIBR had their chances on Overpass and made that a good game. But aside from that, that's it. And quite frankly, those games weren't overtime games. Those weren't games that, like Astralis was scared of losing in a really bad spot. They were incredibly dominant in this tournament. When they got to the final, they ended up playing actually what ended up being the easiest opponent because it was the opponent that was the least likely to have been in the final. It was ENCE from Finland. Now, great run by ENCE, yes. Components of a miracle run where they beat the number 2 and number 3 teams in the world and then had to go against the number 1 team in the world. Not entirely a fluke, but it was a fluke to some degree. I don't personally expect them to do that again. I think even the nature of how they did it was quite unexpected. Not only some of the maps they were able to win against opponents on, but for example, being able to outfrag players like NAF, players like Electronic, having someone like X7, your support player who normally has trash numbers, having really good numbers right up until the final. But you know what? None of that continued into the final. In the final, they couldn't win on their own map Train, the map that they were like 13 game winning streak on, the map that no one else wanted to even play them on. They even got to ban out Nuke. That still didn't help them. They went to Inferno, where Astralis, in theory, everyone talks about just their nuke, right? No, Inferno is godlike for Astralis as well. So yes, you got absolutely spanked over there. So props to ENCE. Like, they did a great job just reaching the final. If they'd have even gone out, if they'd have even lost that game to Na'Vi in the third map, I still said it, what an amazing performance this is. Incredible in the context to them, but this isn't a video about ENCE. I would say if you weighed up in contextually, based on who the team was, what their expectations were, how they actually played, and who they ended up playing based on the ELO system, I think the teams that come out of this major looking the most impressive is number 1, Astralis, obviously. Number 2, ENCE, again, fairly obvious, especially in light of who they beat. Number 3, MIBR, in the context that they made semis, they were able to at least take a game against Astralis, kind of to an interesting area. They showed some potential. It's their first event with this lineup again. And number 4, the obvious one, should be Renegades, right? Because even though they did underwhelm in the first playoff series, they did so well to get this far. They looked so sturdy. I think they made a couple of kind of like panic moves in the veto and some of the things they did in those games. So I think those are the teams that come out looking the best ultimately. Quite frankly, ENCE were easily beaten in the final. The one detail I want to bring up about the final, it doesn't matter, Astralis won anyway, is that I am really surprised by what Astralis did in the veto there. Because I think if they had vetoed Cash, if they hadn't vetoed Cash, rather, because what happened is there were 2 teams that choose to both permaban Cash, ENCE and Astralis, and ENCE decided not to ban Cash, and Astralis decided to ban it. Now, I think if Astralis just floats Cash there, they could have banned Train, and they could have made ENCE's pick an even worse scenario. It didn't end up mattering. Astralis won Train as it was anyway, and quite frankly, in the context of the game, wasn't really all that close, although there was a couple of clutch wins by Zipnix that helped win it and put it away. But I actually think Astralis could have made this easier on themselves. They don't need to. It doesn't matter ultimately. But I really do think there's no universe ENCE is going to pick Cash as their pick there and dare to do that with no comfort in a grand final of a major where, except for Alu, none of them have ever been before. I just don't buy they do it personally. Luckily, it didn't end up mattering anyway. Inferno is just so godlike for Astralis. It's unreal. In the context of the fact that, yes, they're still unbeaten with this lineup on Nuke. They've won 29 games in a row on that. People get too caught up in thinking, right, so they're a specialist on Nuke. No, they're absurdly good on Inferno as well. I think they've won something mental with this lineup on LAN. Like 41 games out of 51 played on Inferno. That's fucking bonkers. You could make an argument with the sample size, the quality of opponents you're playing, and the meta of the map, meaning that other teams generally don't get those kind of win rates, then arguably their Inferno's even better than their Nuke when you consider how many more times they've played it. Generally, the map pool for Astralis is just way too good. I'm going to have a lot of content coming on this soon. Videos and written. I mean, at this major alone, Astralis won on all 6 of the maps that they play, with the caveat being that they permaban cash and don't play it. That's how absurdly good this team is. As I said, they didn't lose any maps in the playoffs. They were just winning the opponent's pick no matter what it was, every single fucking time, no matter who it is. So, in terms of the MVP for this tournament, interestingly enough, in light of a video I made on this topic, Device's numbers say he should be the MVP, but actually a lot of those numbers ended up being kind of padded by him having a fairly easy game on Inferno, and the fact that because he's playing with the AWP and because of his style of play, it's so tough to get to him and kill him that he's got a nightmare for the plus-minus differential. He can run up insane plus-minuses that for me are very different from when like Simple and Nico did it. So I don't mind if you want to give Device the MVP. Statistically, probably deserves it. Is he the best player in Astralis? Yes. Did he play well? Yes, he played very, very well at this major. But this is actually a rare example of where I do think Xyp9x deserved the MVP. Not like the other tournaments where he finishes with like 0.62 FPR and then you guys just remember him winning some really valuable clutches and you use that logic of, but if he hadn't won those clutches, they wouldn't have won the match. A statement that is not falsifiable, an absolutely nonsense statement. You can make that observation if you want, but we can't know that. And we certainly can't know what another player in his place might have done. Maybe there'd be a player who's less clutch but would frag more and they wouldn't need to be in those positions. Who knows, right? But unlike the other tournaments where he mainly did just win the clutches, this time his fragging was at a really high level as well, just as it was over the totality of last year, but not usually at individual events. So I actually will give it to Xyp9x. He had really good individual numbers, the eye test was there, and he won loads of the clutches as well, and he had some big series. So I think all in all, this is a guy who helped them get past MIBR. I think he did a great job. Generally, Astralis, as you'd expect from a team this dominant, is a nearly flawless team. I mean, with the exception of Glaive, everyone had great stats at this tournament. Everyone had series where they were the better players, they took over, they dominated, they beat the opposing team's best performers. Everyone played great generally. The team play was there. They look as good as ever as a team. Remember, this is a team that when they were really, really hot in the spring going into the summer of last year, people made out as though, well, we'll see how long this lasts. It's like they look better now than they did then. They've won more championships in the latter half of their time with this 5-man lineup than they did in the first half, including like a couple of majors. I'm not quite sure if the first major would quite tick over in the second half or not. It's absurd. And they're also a team that just doesn't lose 2 tournaments in a row, something I'll get to later on. So let's talk now about the history element, which is what is the context of the greatness of what we've seen here? Because obviously this is Astralis' era already. It's the age of Astralis. So you're talking now not just about great things you've done today, but things that match up against all of history. So in terms of the accomplishment, they win their 3rd major title, or at least Device, Dupree, Xyp9x and Glaive do. That ties them with JW, Flusher and Pronax for the most majors ever won in CSGO history. And remember, this is a scenario that's worth pointing out. When Fnatic was in their prime, there were 3 majors a year. During the entire time that Astralis has existed, there have only been 2 majors a year, and yet they're already at the same count as the Fnatic boys. I think personally, if there'd have been 3 majors a year, we'd had 3 majors last year, and this would in theory now be the 4th major that this Astralis lineup let me think. No, it'd be the 3rd major this Astralis lineup could play. Well, obviously they already could have gone past this and set a record of their own. I think they would smash, by the end of this lineup, they would smash that record. I think they'd have 5, 6 majors under their belts. As anyone who followed the old StarCraft Korean Brood War scene knows, when you have that era of a year and a half, 2 years or so, you got to have a lot of tournaments in then to get them. That's how you get the 4, 5, 6 OSL, MSL combined titles that the Nadas, Jadongs, Flashes of the world were able to get towards. Isle of Uv, Savior. So Magisk, it's his 2nd major title. He's obviously won the 2 that they've won with this particular era. They've gone back to back on majors, which means that they joined Fnatic and then the Luminosity/SK Gaming Corps as the only other lineups to ever do that. Those 3 teams have all won back-to-back majors. NIP never did it because they only won 1. Virtus Pro's only won 1. I mean, there's not basically any point to mention anyone else. They've now won every final of the majors they've been in. Astralis is the only team in their first 3 major finals to win all 3. NIP won 1 out of their first 3. The Fnatic guys won 2 out of their first 3. You have Na'Vi won none out of the first 3. Virtus Pro and Luminosity/SK haven't been in 3. So this is absurd levels of expertise, dominance, excellence. And obviously the context is this was the team that was always chalking in the semis of the majors. If you'd have gone back 3 years, 4 years and said the team that'll end up winning all the major finals they play in, equaling all the records, will be Astralis, the other teams would go, the fuck are you talking about? We body those guys. So never been done before, winning all 3 of your first 3 major finals. This is a brand new record. They've also won their second straight major without dropping a map in the playoffs. Now, not only does that mean you've won the opponent's map pick every time, which is an absurd level of dominance, but none of the other great teams in history have done it even once. In fact, nobody who's won a major has ever gone through the whole playoffs, which have always been the same format, single elimination, best of 3, 3 matches, 3 series to be played. No one's ever done it without dropping a map. At the first major, Fnatic dropped a map to NiP. Virtus.pro dropped a map to LGB. I can go through everyone. NIP lost maps in every single series they played in. Fnatic lost a map to NIP in the final of Katowice. Obviously, they lost a map to Virtus.pro in the Cologne semi-final, I think it was. In the final of DreamHack Cluj-Napoca, that wouldn't be the semi. In the semi-finals of DreamHack Cluj-Napoca, we all know G2 took Envious to the limit. The SK/Luminosity guys lost a map to Virtus.pro in each of their 2 majors. Obviously, the guys from Astralis lost a map to Virtus.pro in the final of the E-League Atlanta. Then you had PGL Krakow, where we all know, for example, Astralis beat Gambit on one of the maps in the semi-finals. Then you come to E-League Boston. Well, obviously, the guys from Cloud9 lost a bunch of maps en route to the title. Then you have Astralis. Astralis are the only team to ever do the major playoffs without losing a map, and they've done it twice and back-to-back. How fucking insane is this team? It's ridiculous, isn't it? Now, the context of this team is, I think everyone overblows how bad the other teams are, how bad the contenders to Astralis are. Like, let's be real. If Astralis was even 10% worse last year, 15% worse, and they, let's say, I put them at a level where they don't win all the titles. Well, now, already, Team Liquid and Na'Vi and FaZe are definitely winning titles. I mean, Na'Vi and Team FaZe did win titles. I think MIBR Fnatic would be able to sneak titles if you look at some of the matchups they had against Astralis and the other teams. Obviously, North did win a big title. Then you look if Astralis hadn't even been a top team, well, now Team Liquid might have 3 or 4 big titles and be considered the greatest NA team by everyone of all time. Na'Vi might have a major under their belt. FaZe Clan probably would have won the fucking Intel Grand Slam. MIBR would have won titles at the end. Maybe they wouldn't even have changed lineup. Fnatic would have had a resurgence with the newer lineup with Twist and Brolan and maybe won that EPL Season 8 tournament. There's so many crazy things out there that could, should, maybe would have... Actually, wait a second. Was that actually at... Was that EPL? I think it was maybe IEM Chicago. I'm maybe forgetting that one. So, I think with this one, that people are going down the Roger Federer / George St. Pierre approach, which is, for Roger Federer, people always try to claim that during his peak, oh, well, it wasn't fair because, you know, he didn't have any challenges. But that's because he killed all the challengers dead, so they couldn't win enough titles to then be considered true challengers, and therefore people argue, well, he didn't have any true challengers. No, he was just so dominant, he didn't let anyone else become a challenger. He didn't let Hewitt and Roddick and Safin and all these fucking Nabaldi and all these sick players get their titles at that point in time. Then you go and you look, the GSP angle, same shit with GSP. People used to go, oh, it's boring the way he wins. What? Taking the opponent's strength and either neutralising it or beating him at it and then winning championship fights over and over again without even losing a fucking round for like something mental, like what, 7 or 8 championships in a row. Again, people will always hate on this type of an almost perfect dominant champion. People love a champion who's got a lot of risk in his game, like Conor McGregor, who could get knocked out, he could get submitted. They don't like the guy who just smothers the other person, shuts every single aspect of their game down, and then wins with pure dominance, even though that's actually more impressive in my opinion. It's not in terms of the eye test. The aesthetics go with the guy who's the flashy guy, but the person who's mastered the game and shuts down the opponent, that is incredible to me and deserves more praise. Also, then people try to go with the angle. Because, by the way, on that angle, I think people are just doing it where, if you notice, they had a million excuses in a row for Astralis. Oh, it's just cobblestone being removed. They then master dust to the map replaced that no one else masters. All right, that didn't work. It's just nuke. Then they have a godlike spree on Inferno that everyone fucking plays. Oh, yeah, that doesn't work, does it? And then no one else is as good on nuke. All right, it's just the smoke bug. Smoke bug gets removed. They stomp a fucking major with no smoke bug. Oh, it's the It's the org, isn't it? Or the other teams. You guys have done a bad fucking job. No, those are the best teams and players in the world. They're doing what they genuinely think will give them the best chance to win this game, round, match, kill, tournament, this era. They're all trying to do that. Remember, that was the original argument given against Astralis. Oh, they just got lucky that all the other teams haven't made roster moves. Every one of those teams has made a roster move since. Literally. The only one that didn't is Na'Vi, and Na'Vi made an internal swap that made Electronic better and started winning tournaments. FaZe Clan's brought in Adren and kicked out Carrigan. Team Liquid's kicked out Taco, not intentionally, brought in Stewie. They've made a big move, changed their coach. Obviously, you keep going down the list. Mouse Sports brought back Sticko, now they've kicked him. Everyone's made the moves. MIBR's got back to Brazilians. Everyone has made their moves. It just doesn't fucking matter. Astralis still wins. It's like the joke would be like, a Counter-Strike tournament is where teams change players, change up maps, practice differently, attempt to fix all their mistakes, improve, and then in the end, Astralis wins anyway. Like, it sounds like a joke, but it's fucking true. You guys are going too far bagging on these teams. They're not as bad as you make out. I'm not going to accept that. I've watched all the teams in history play. These are good teams. Like, I'll give you that Na'Vi's an overrated team because their placing's always better than it should be because Simple Hard carries the motherfuckers. The rest of these teams are great teams, though, and even then, Na'Vi's a pretty solid team in the context of history, right? Look at the lineups of Na'Vi that were making major finals. They were better fundamentally, but they lacked the firepower and they weren't as dangerous. So I'm going to go ahead and say this. If you look at the other angle, which is that you go, right, it's because of the professionalism. It's because they've got great practice facilities. They've got sports psychologists. They've got dietitians. They're all very professional. Problem is, most of that applies to North. North is doing those things with infrastructure. And look at how bad their team has been and how few championships they've got. Where the fuck is their major? When are they going to make a major final? Exactly. So these angles and excuses don't really work. You can attempt to introduce them. We can have a discussion, but they're not really sticking for me. So I already thought that Astralis had edged it to be the greatest team of all time. It's an interesting debate, depending on what you go with. I don't think there's that much debate left after this major, quite frankly. Sure, I've got recency bias. I've just watched them win the major today, and I will investigate this topic already, but I think their level is unbelievable. I think what they've done and in the context that they've done it, I think this is the greatest team of all time in CSGO. I think it's even a team that you could definitely put in contention for greatest Counter-Strike team of all time. You look at the Golden Five, you look at Fnatic 2009, you look at SK 2003, you look at MTW 2008, you look at Na'Vi 2010. This team can go head-to-head with any of those in terms of competing with them and potentially win out and be an even better team. You think those teams never lost maps? Some of them very rarely did, but then some of them were in different eras, right? So after seeing this major, after hearing all the haters and people downplaying them and accusing them of shit, Astralis has gone back to back. So you know what? I don't want to hear about this ever again. Not even when MIBR got Brazilian again. Not even when he's saying Thorin tell him again. Astralis being putting on a show. It was a sellout event. Oh! This video and all of the content on my channel is kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, James Harding, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Travis Greb, Tristan Jones, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to take part in an esports discussion with yours truly? Would you like teasers for some of my upcoming content, see who the guests are going to be? Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Perhaps you'd like to suggest a guest you'd like to see in my content or a topic to discuss. Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.